With the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025 just a few weeks away, whether it's on the news or in social media, we begin to see lists. Lists like the top 10 movies we saw during 2024, or maybe the top places we visited, the top books of the year. But I also came across in my research a different list. I found the top reasons in 2024 why people are afraid. Now, Chapman University in Chapman News began a survey with the following question that I want you to ask yourself. What scares you? I see people whispering to their loved one or to their neighbor. What scares you? The researchers explain when a person is first asked this question, people usually answer with, I'm afraid of public speaking. I'm afraid of flying, or spiders, or snakes, or sharks. I named one, Farah, yeah? Or even clowns. Anyone with clowns? Yep, a few. High percentages of Americans said they were also afraid of government corruption, of terrorism, of theft, and the personal fears are just as high. People are scared of becoming seriously ill, scared of seeing their loved ones hurt, scared of not having enough money to prepare for future goals. I bring this up because if you look at our Parsha, we see a fear that is mentioned that I don't think will ever make any list. But it's a fear that I believe every single one of us falls prey to, and we wish we didn't. And that's the fear of being less than. Less than our neighbors, less than our colleagues, less than our siblings. It is a fear of succumbing to an envy that is so malignant that we find ourselves unable to reach higher because we're always looking over our shoulder, wondering how. How do they seem to have more money? How do they seem to be more successful? How are they prettier, more fit? How do they always seem to have it all? Now, this kind of fear usually doesn't make a list because it's hard to admit a fear that we all share. That fear being an envy of others. Back to the Parsha. Jacob is in the process of reuniting with his brother Esau, and as we know, he sends messengers ahead to see what his brother possesses. But he's worried that Esau might attack him. And the Torah reads, Vayira Yaakov me'od. Jacob was very scared. Now, at first glance, we might fall into the trap that commentators have made for thousands of years. It's Jacob versus Esau. Of course it's good versus evil. Jacob should be scared. Esau is known as the hunter. He's known as wild and impulsive. And Jacob, he's our patriarch. It's Rebecca's favorite, the gatherer, the student, the sage. Why shouldn't Jacob be scared of someone who has been portrayed as a monster? But if we remain in this kind of dichotomy, I believe we do a disservice to our tradition. Because as we know, Jacob comes into this world clinging to Esau's heel. He enters this world envious of Esau's position as the firstborn. Remember, they are twins, and his envy doesn't stop. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs teaches key to understanding the Jacob-Esau story is what Rene Girard calls mimetic desire, the desire to have what someone else has just because they have it. But ultimately, this is the desire to be someone else. Sachs continues, Jacob was the man who wanted to be Esau. Why? Because Esau had one thing that Jacob didn't: his father's love. And then we see Jacob's, what I call his second dream, when he's wrestling with an unnamed man. And the commentators ultimately agree. It's not that Jacob was really wrestling with an angel or with a stranger, but Jacob's wrestling with a piece of himself, the part of himself that he knows he no longer can live with, the part of his character that he is constantly wrestling with. He asks himself the question over and over again, why can't I be more like him? Why can't I be more like Esau? Or perhaps more dangerous, maybe he's asking the question, why can't I just be Esau? Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch says, a person who has a good heart is one in whom envy, jealousy, and hate gain no access. Now that's a beautiful lesson, but it is hard to achieve. Because like Jacob, name one person who doesn't at some point in their lifetime wrestle with envy, looking at someone else's lot in life and wonder, why can't I have that? Why can't I be that? But Mishle tells us that jealousy is like rot to the bones. And here, yes, I'm using the words interchangeably. Once we let jealousy and envy take hold, our hearts begin to change. The heart transforms from a place of wanting of others instead of wanting for others. Now, I'm not going to give you the exact answer to living without jealousy. The fear of not becoming successful, the fear of not being as popular or admired, the fear of not having the same amount of followers on social media, it's an age-old problem. Okay, the social media one is a new one. But the struggle is still the same. But I do think our tradition reveals a pathway forward that's worth exploring. Rabbi Alan Liu asks us to look back in the Torah at the story of Cain and Abel, two brothers in the early pages of our Torah, with an ending for Abel that didn't go very well. If you remember, Cain kills Abel because God favors Abel's gifts. The brothers give offerings to God, and Abel gives the firstlings of his flock, and Cain is said to give the fruit of the soil. Liu explains that God accepts Abel's gifts because he gave of his best, while Cain did not. Now, if you take this as a modern interpretation, according to Rabbi Liu, to the world, each and every one of us must give our greatest gifts. Give the cream of your own crop. And he cautions, in doing so, stop looking at the other person and their gifts. Instead, look at yourself. And if you will, I take the Mishnah in Bava Batra as a proof text. It says that one may not open into the courtyard of joint holders by a door opposite a door or by a window opposite a window. Meaning, wherever you live, if you decide to build a home, you should try very hard not to have a door facing another person's door and not have a window facing into the window of another person's home. Why? Because it's during that time in which we start to define our neighbors, our friends, our family, only by what they possess, not by who they are. And likewise, we start to define ourselves by only what we possess, not by who we are. I think we begin to root out the rot of jealousy and envy by wrestling with ourselves and naming a fear that probably won't make any list in 2024 or 2025 or 2026. But I believe after admitting that we are afraid of not being like ourselves, when we're afraid and wrestling with the fact that sometimes we feel less than, that we haven't amounted to what someone else has achieved, then like Jacob, we might just wake up and realize the kind of improvements that we might embrace. You know, he only continues his travels to meet his brother after he asks the unnamed stranger to bless him. And the blessing comes through the gift of a name. What's Jacob's name? What does it change to? Yisrael, the one who wrestles with God. I think it's an eternal reminder to all of us, we are called B'nai Yisrael, not B'nai Yaakov, B'nai Yisrael, because we are forever wrestling with our inner demons, with our darkest fears. We are all wrestling and struggling with something. No matter how great someone looks or how wonderful their life is, everyone is struggling in some way. But here's the most beautiful and scary realization. The fear of never being like our neighbor, our friend, our family. The fear is true. We will never be like them. We won't. Because God never intended us to be created to replicate each other. God's intention, I think, is simply put, imagine you leaving this world without gifting this world with your greatest talents, with your greatest gifts, with your greatest strengths, with your greatest blessings. What if you leave this world not gifting the world with the blessings that only you are meant to offer? Now that is a fear I never want to face. Shabbat shalom.